Title: Outpost Echo. The dust cloud rose from the empty desert highway like a ghost chasing something, trailing behind the loud rumble of motorcycles. A dozen bikes, their engines growling like a pack of wolves, cut through the dry heat and the low hum of the barren land. They were riders, veterans of the road, their leathers and tattoos telling stories of a life lived without restraint. The group was led by Jace Viper Thompson, a man whose hard stare matched the intimidating black and red skull on his jacket. They had been riding for hours, a streak of chrome and leather that seemed to defy the arid landscape of New Mexico. Their destination was a small outpost, a military station far off the main highways, known to the local bikers as a place to get fuel and supplies without the prying eyes of a town sheriff. They were just passing through, nothing more, nothing less. But things were about to go sideways. The outpost was small, a collection of concrete buildings surrounded by barbed wire, camouflaged jeeps, and soldiers who looked like they had been stationed there for years, far away from the comforts of normal civilian life. The outpost was so remote that it didn't even have a name on the map. To the world, it was just another dusty relic of a bygone era. Jace and his crew pulled up to the entrance. The air smelled faintly of gasoline, and the heat shimmered off the tarmac. A guard was standing near a small booth, looking up with the dead-eyed stare of someone who'd seen too much to care. "Hey, old man," Jace called out, a grin spreading across his scarred face. "This place open for business? We're low on fuel and could use a cold one." The guard didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, unmoving, scanning the group like a predator measuring its prey. His name was Sergeant Miles Donovan, a man who had spent the last 15 years in places far more dangerous than this one. Places where bikers and civilians didn't get a second glance. He had learned the art of silence, to observe before reacting. Donovan took a slow drag from his cigarette before flicking it away. "You ain't supposed to be here," he muttered, his voice gravelly from years of shouting orders to men and women under his command. No civilians allowed past this point. Jace chuckled, revving his engine. "Come on, man. We just need a quick pit stop. No harm, no foul." The other bikers laughed, the sound carrying like a pack of hyenas ready for the kill. But Donovan wasn't fazed. His eyes narrowed as he stepped forward, just enough to block their path. "You should turn back," he said quietly, the weight of his words heavy. "The outpost is off limits." Jace looked at him, sizing him up. Donovan wasn't a giant. He wasn't some Hollywood soldier with bulging muscles, but there was a hardness in his eyes that made the biker pause. There was something about him, something that made Jace feel like they weren't dealing with just another clueless soldier. He leaned forward, eyes flashing with something between amusement and anger. "You don't know who you're talking to, soldier. I don't take orders from some washed-up old man in a uniform. We'll be out of here in 15 minutes. You can count on that." Donovan didn't flinch. "You don't want to do this." Jace smirked, revving his bike again, more aggressively this time. "What's gonna happen, huh? You going to shoot us all? You gonna play tough guy and make us leave?" The temperature seemed to rise as the tension thickened in the air. The sound of the engines roared louder, echoing across the quiet desert. The rest of Jace's gang were getting restless, and Donovan could feel the crackling of an imminent fight. He knew this wasn't just about fuel anymore. It was about pride. "I don't need to shoot you," Donovan said, his voice low but steady. "I've dealt with guys like you before. You mess with the wrong people, and things get ugly real quick." Jace laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Ugly? You think you can scare us with that old man's speech?" Without another word, he revved his engine and made a move to ride past Donovan. But before the front tire could move an inch, Donovan stepped forward, his body almost blocking the way completely. In a blur of motion, Donovan grabbed the front of Jace's jacket, yanking him off the bike with a strength that surprised even the seasoned biker. Jace stumbled, hitting the ground hard, but he was back on his feet in an instant, rage flashing in his eyes. The rest of his gang jumped off their bikes, circling Donovan with the same predatory grins that had been on Jace's face just moments before. Donovan didn't move. "Stand down," Donovan said quietly but firmly. "This is your last chance. You don't want to fight me here." Jace, his jaw clenched, took a step forward. "You've got a death wish, old man. Nobody disrespects me like that." The bikers moved in closer. This was it. They were going to show this soldier what happens when you mess with the wrong people. But then, out of nowhere, a voice rang out. "That's enough." A figure emerged from the shadows of the outpost. A soldier who hadn't been seen by the bikers until now. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that made even Jace take a hesitant step back. His uniform was clean, crisp, unlike the others who had spent too long in the dust. His name was Captain Ethan West, and he had just returned from a tour in the Middle East, where violence was a constant companion. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the bikers like a hawk watching a pack of wild dogs. "Captain," Donovan said, standing straight and saluting. "Sir," West nodded. "Fall back, Sergeant. I've got this." Donovan hesitated, but then stepped back, letting the captain take charge. The bikers watched as the tension shifted from a confrontation between a soldier and a biker gang to something even more dangerous. Jace's smirk faltered as West slowly walked toward him, his eyes never leaving the group. "You boys have made a mistake," West said, his voice like ice cutting through the heat of the desert. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Jace raised an eyebrow. "And who the hell are you?" "Who am I?" West chuckled darkly, stepping closer. "I'm the guy who's been to hell and back, and I'm the last person you want to piss off." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "I've seen what happens to people who mess with men like me. You're not just up against one soldier. You're up against the ghosts of everyone who's been here before. And believe me, you don't want to test that." Jace took a step back, but his pride kept him from retreating entirely. "You think you can scare me, soldier? We'll leave when we're good and ready." West's expression hardened. "This isn't a negotiation. Either you leave or you get a lesson in respect. I'm giving you one last chance to walk away." The tension in the air was palpable. The bikers had fought wars on the roads, dealt with law enforcement, and lived for moments just like this. But something about Captain West unnerved them. Maybe it was his calm demeanor, or the way he seemed so unfazed by their threats. Either way, the bikers knew they were in deeper than they had anticipated. Jace, his pride wounded but his survival instincts kicking in, gave a sharp nod. All right. We're gone." But West wasn't done. He took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them. "You're leaving. But remember this. Some fights you can't win. Some roads you can't ride." With that, West turned and walked away, his boots crunching on the gravel as he disappeared into the shadows of the outpost. The bikers, still processing what had just happened, reluctantly started up their bikes and began to leave. But as they drove away, Jace couldn't help but look over his shoulder. The figure of Captain West was standing there, still watching, as if daring them to come back. And they knew. Deep down, they knew they had messed with the wrong soldier. The outpost remained silent in the fading light of the evening, a place of hidden strength in the midst of nowhere. The bikers were gone, but Captain Ethan West stood there, unmoving, as the last of the dust settled around them. He had faced far worse than a group of rowdy bikers. And in the end, it wasn't about winning a fight. It was about making sure that when you were called upon, you answered and made sure that those who tried to disturb peace knew exactly what they were up against.